Hi everyone, we're here with Dr. Shamara Wettimuni. She's a historian, a writer, and an author whose book is soon to be launched here. Shamara, your work delves into an exploration of a lot of themes. Very complex, very diverse themes about identity, culture, history. So tell us about the process of weaving all of that together to create this one holistic compound that is put out for the general public to read.
Okay, thanks Talitha. It's lovely to meet you, and as a student of history and literature yourself, I'm really pleased to see the kids are all right. So I decided to focus on ethno-religious violence in Sri Lanka historically because I was really obviously not personally experienced, but witnessing what was happening in Sri Lanka, especially from around 2013, 2014 onwards.
Right.
And I noticed that people were talking about religious conflict, religious violence as a new phenomenon, something that came out post-ethnic conflict.
Yes.
And I was aware that actually there was this episode that had taken place historically in 1915, and I wanted to start with that. But what I realized when I started looking at 1915 is you can't understand 1915 by starting there. And what I found was that I was going further and further back, and now my research actually starts in 1853, because that's how long, that's the kind of level of context we need to understand something that's happening 65 years later.
Yes.
And so my book really tries to provide this longer history of religious revival, of migration and trade, of economic competition, as well as under the very difficult conditions of colonialism that Ceylon was going through at that time, in order to explain the phenomenon of violence between communities.
That's actually really lovely to hear. And when you think about it, your book actually, generally based on history, just keeps going back in time, back in calendars. So as children pick up these books now, they're going to be picking them up soon. What message do you think they should get from that, living in a completely different age? Nonetheless, these issues are still occurring to some degree around them.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Talitha, because I have to say that my understanding of history is constantly changing. I'm constantly having to check myself, my biases, my prejudices, and realize that, everything is not as I was told, or everything is not as I assumed. And I just hope that my message for children is, it would be, don't accept everything you're saying. Follow the footnotes, look into it yourself, make up your own mind, because, we're in an age of so much information that we simply can't process it all, but we also can't accept everything that we're told. And really just, it's about, and history as a discipline, I think, is really useful in that, because what it does is it really encourages us to think critically, to question our knowledge, to question our sources, and then develop our arguments out of that, but really do the research yourself.
Yeah, it's very insightful to hear. You're also the founder of this beautiful organization called Ithihas. You're focusing on something that's very easily negated by a lot of us. You're promoting the history educational reform in Sri Lanka. Tell us about that. Tell us how that's...
Thank you, Talitha, and I'm always happy to talk about the work that we do through Ithihas, because it really looks at non-state alternatives to history education in a context where successive states, successive governments have shown little to no interest in changing the way we teach history and the way we think about Sri Lankan history in particular.
Yeah.
And so what I do with Ithihas is that I predominantly work with school teachers and junior history lecturers to try and get them to also think about creative ways of teaching history, of exciting students in a context where you are stuck with a problematic or limited
Yes.
or inadequate school history textbook, or you're confined by the structures of a state university. And obviously there are so many opportunities nowadays with social media. I mean, on the one hand, it's a toxic and dangerous space, but there are also ways of reaching new audiences and disrupting, in a sense, the state's monopoly or narrative on Sri Lankan history and making room and making space for alternative histories, for marginalized histories, that I think will help us. Children also belong more equally as citizens.
Absolutely, completely agreed. Do you think that there's anything specific that you would say needs to change to foster that type of development?
Oh gosh, that's a lot needs to change.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If you could pick on one, maybe pivotal thing.
It's something that came up during the conversation with Sujit and Judith on stage today, is that perhaps we need to move away from thinking through solely ethnic and religious identities in that form, communities, that thinking about community through ethnicity and through this idea of the nation was really a very 19th century thing that has survived into the present day context. But that is changing rapidly in the 21st century, and maybe we can also lean into different ways of configuring relations between people. It shouldn't be that I am from this community and you are from that community, but we can be creators, we can be students of history, we can. I think I want to almost see a break away from the nation, because until we do that, I don't think we can ever be truly Sri Lankan. I think this preoccupation with ethnicity and religion is almost a barrier.
Yes, you have a very important point to make there. I think that's a great message to put across to the people who are going to be listening. How has your experience been here these 3 days at the Literary and Arts Festival in Colombo?
It's I'm really honored to have been invited to speak. The HSBC and the curators have done a wonderful job of putting together a very diverse event with stuff that appeals to different audiences, different ages. They've got a wonderful mix of local and foreign authors, and these wonderful moderators who are adding so much value to the discussions. As much as it's been informative and educational, I think there's also been some space for the political, which I also think is also very important. So yes, it's been a pleasure being here.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.